Long before cities rose from stone and steel, before agriculture reshaped the land and humans bent nature to their will, the earth belonged to giants. Among them, none was more iconic than the mammoth. Across frozen plains, wind-scoured tundras, and vast steppe landscapes, mammoths moved like living mountains, shaping the world with every step they took. Their presence defined the Ice Age, not merely as inhabitants of it, but as architects of an entire ecosystem. The mammoth story begins deep in evolutionary time, emerging from ancient elephant ancestors that once roamed warmer climates. As global temperatures dropped and ice sheets expanded, only those capable of radical adaptation survived. The mammoth did not flee the cold, it embraced it. Over thousands of generations, natural selection sculpted an animal perfectly engineered for freezing environments. Thick layers of fat insulated its body, while a dense coat of long guard hairs and soft underfur trapped heat close to the skin. Even its ears shrank in size, minimizing heat loss in brutal winds. To stand beside a mammoth would have been to confront scale itself. Towering over early humans, weighing several tons, and armed with tusks that curved outward like colossal sides, the mammoth was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. These tusks were not simply weapons. They were tools, used to clear snow, strip bark from frozen trees, and defend the herd from predators that dared test the boundaries of survival. Mammoths were not solitary beasts wandering aimlessly through snowfields. They lived in structured social groups, bound together by memory, communication, and shared survival strategies. Matriarchs led herds across ancient migration routes, paths remembered across generations, guiding their kin towards seasonal feeding grounds. These journeys could span hundreds of kilometers, following rhythms older than humanity itself. Their diet was vast and demanding. Mammoths consumed enormous quantities of grasses, sedges, shrubs, and bark, using their specialized teeth to grind down tough, frozen vegetation. In doing so, they transformed landscapes, preventing forests from overtaking grasslands and maintaining open ecosystems that supported countless other species. The Ice Age was not just cold, it was alive, balanced, and deeply interconnected, with the mammoth at its center. Yet even giants exist within fragile systems. Subtle shifts in climate began to alter the world the mammoth depended on. Glacial retreats changed vegetation patterns. Wetlands replaced dry steppe. Snow became heavier, harder to clear, more difficult to navigate. At the same time, a new force emerged: humans, armed not with claws or tusks, but with strategy, cooperation, and relentless curiosity. At first, humans were just another presence on the landscape. But over time, their impact grew. Hunting pressure increased, fire reshaped environments, migration routes were disrupted. The mammoth, once a symbol of permanence, found itself trapped between a changing climate and an advancing species that learned quickly. The Ice Age did not end suddenly, and neither did the mammoth. Its decline was slow, fragmented, and uneven across the globe. Some populations vanished early, others lingered on isolated islands, surviving thousands of years longer than their mainland relatives. Each surviving herd was a fading echo of a world slipping away. What remains today are bones locked in permafrost, tusks frozen in time, and genetic fragments that whisper stories of resilience and loss. The mammoth is gone, but its legacy endures, not just as a prehistoric curiosity, but as a reminder of how tightly life is bound to climate, balance, and restraint. In the frozen silence of the Arctic, where wind still howls across empty plains, the mammoth's shadow lingers. It asks a question without words: how long can even the strongest endure when the world itself begins to change? As the Ice Age tightened its grip on the planet, the mammoth did not merely survive within the cold, it became a defining feature of it. The frozen world was not a barren wasteland, but a dynamic and highly productive environment known as the Mammoth Steppe. Stretching across Eurasia and North America, this vast biome was dominated by grasses, herbs, and low shrubs, all adapted to cold, dry conditions. At the center of this system stood the mammoth, both consumer and engineer, shaping the land through its sheer presence. Every movement of a mammoth altered the terrain. Their immense weight compacted snow, exposing vegetation beneath and allowing smaller animals access to food during harsh winters. Their tusks tore into frozen ground, uprooting plants and breaking the surface crust that would otherwise suffocate new growth. In summer months, their constant grazing prevented woody plants from overtaking grasslands, maintaining the open ecosystems that defined the Ice Age. Without mammoths, the steppe itself began to unravel. Physiology was the mammoth's greatest weapon against extinction, until it wasn't. Beneath the iconic fur lay a complex system of adaptations fine-tuned to cold extremes. Blood vessels in their extremities operated under a countercurrent heat exchange system, minimizing heat loss to the environment. Their feet were broad and cushioned, distributing weight across snow and ice, preventing them from sinking where other large animals would falter. Even their tails were short, reducing surface area exposed to freezing winds. Internally, mammoths carried a thick layer of subcutaneous fat that served both as insulation and energy reserve. During long winters when vegetation was scarce or inaccessible, this fat sustained them through months of caloric deficit. Their metabolism was slow but powerful, optimized for endurance rather than speed. This was not an animal built for quick escapes, it was built to endure conditions that erased the weak. Social structure reinforced this resilience. Mammoth herds were not random groupings, but tightly bonded family units led by experienced matriarchs. These leaders carried a living map of the land within their memory, knowledge of distant feeding grounds, safe river crossings, and seasonal refuges passed down over generations. In a world without landmarks or permanence, memory itself became a survival tool. Calves were born into hardship. From the moment they stood on unsteady legs, they were surrounded by danger, predators, weather, and starvation. Protection came from numbers and coordination. Adults formed defensive circles when threatened, tusks outward, calves shielded at the center. Predators such as saber-toothed cats and large Ice Age wolves rarely attacked unless desperation outweighed caution. Even then, success was far from guaranteed. Yet for all their strength, mammoths were deeply dependent on environmental stability. Their reproductive cycle was slow. Gestation lasted nearly 2 years, and calves required long periods of maternal care. Population recovery from losses was measured in decades, not seasons. This made mammoths extraordinarily vulnerable to sudden or sustained disruptions, whether environmental or external. As glacial cycles shifted, subtle changes began to compound. Rising temperatures increased precipitation, transforming dry grasslands into wetter environments dominated by mosses and shrubs. Snow became denser, forming thick crusts that mammoths struggled to break through. Their tusks, once perfectly suited to scraping away light snow, were less effective against ice-hardened layers. Energy expenditure rose, while food availability declined. At the same time, a new pressure intensified. Humans were no longer passive observers of the Ice Age world. They had become skilled hunters, armed with coordinated strategies, tools, and an understanding of animal behavior that rivaled instinct itself. Mammoths, slow to reproduce and bound to predictable migration routes, became targets not just of necessity, but opportunity. Hunting a mammoth was not a simple act of violence, it was an event. Entire human groups would plan and execute hunts over days, sometimes weeks. Traps were set, terrain was exploited, and exhaustion was used as a weapon. A single successful kill could sustain a community for months, providing meat, fat, bone, and hide. Over time, this pressure, layered atop environmental change, began to fracture mammoth populations. The Ice Age world was still vast, still cold, still wild, but the balance had shifted. The mammoth, once an unchallenged titan of frozen lands, was beginning to face a future it had never evolved to confront, a world changing faster than memory could adapt. By the time the Ice Age began to loosen its grip, the mammoth was already living on borrowed time. The world was warming, but not evenly. Some regions thawed quickly, others remained locked in ice, creating a patchwork of shifting habitats that fractured once continuous populations into isolated pockets. For an animal dependent on vast territories and long migration routes, fragmentation was lethal. Memory could no longer guide herds across landscapes that no longer existed in the same form. Human presence intensified precisely as mammoth resilience weakened. What had once been sporadic encounters became persistent overlap. Humans learned the mammoth's rhythms, the seasons it moved, the valleys it favored, the weaknesses of calves and the exhaustion of the old. Knowledge compounded across generations, turning chance into strategy. The mammoth was not hunted to extinction overnight, it was pressured relentlessly, year after year, until populations thinned beyond recovery. This pressure did not always take the form of direct killing. Even unsuccessful hunts disrupted herds, altering migration paths and separating calves from mothers. Fire, used to clear land or drive animals, transformed vegetation patterns. Wetlands expanded where dry steppe once stretched, replacing nutritious grasses with plants mammoths could not efficiently digest. Each small change chipped away at a survival strategy honed over hundreds of thousands of years. The mammoth's biology became a trap. Its slow reproductive cycle, once a stable approach in a predictable world, turned into a liability. Losses could not be replaced quickly enough. Genetic diversity declined as herds shrank and became isolated. Inbreeding increased, weakening resilience to disease and environmental stress. The mammoth was not simply disappearing, it was unraveling from within. Some populations endured longer than others. On remote islands, cut off from human hunters and buffered against rapid climate shifts, mammoths survived thousands of years beyond their mainland counterparts. These island mammoths were smaller, adapted to limited resources, echoes of a once dominant species clinging to existence at the edges of the world. Their survival proved that extinction was not inevitable, it was conditional. Yet even isolation could not halt the larger forces at play. Climate continued to shift, sea levels rose, vegetation transformed. Eventually, even the last refuges failed. One by one, the final mammoth populations vanished, leaving behind silence where herds once thundered across frozen plains. What makes the mammoth's extinction uniquely haunting is not just its scale, but its timing. Humans were there to witness it, to interact with it, to remember it. Mammoths appear in cave art, carved into bone, etched into stone, evidence of coexistence, reverence, and reliance. They were not monsters to be erased, but giants woven into early human survival and imagination. In their absence, ecosystems changed. Grasslands gave way to forests. Nutrient cycles shifted. Species that depended indirectly on mammoth activity declined or disappeared. The Ice Age world did not simply warm, it transformed into something fundamentally different. The mammoth steppe collapsed, and with it, a way of life for countless organisms. Today, the mammoth exists in fragments, frozen carcasses emerging from melting permafrost, tusks pulled from ancient ground, strands of DNA preserved by cold and time. Modern science studies these remains not only to understand what was lost, but to confront an unsettling possibility that extinction, once complete, may not be entirely final. But resurrection is not restoration. Even if mammoths could walk again, the world that shaped them is gone. Climate, vegetation, and ecological balance have moved on. The mammoth story is not just about disappearance, it is about mismatch between adaptation and acceleration, between endurance and speed. As the planet continues to warm, the mammoth becomes more than a relic of the past. It becomes a mirror, a warning etched in ice and bone, reminding us that even the mightiest species can fall when change outruns memory. In the modern world, the mammoth refuses to stay buried. As ice retreats and permafrost thaws, bodies emerge from the ground almost intact, fur preserved, muscle visible, blood vessels still recognizable. These discoveries collapse the distance between past and present. The mammoth is no longer an abstract idea from textbooks, it becomes tangible again, unsettlingly real. Its extinction stops feeling ancient and starts feeling recent. Science has followed this trail with intense focus. Genetic material extracted from frozen remains has revealed intimate details about mammoth biology, adaptations to cold, immune responses, even pigmentation. Each sequence decoded deepens our understanding, but also raises questions that extend beyond biology. If a species can be mapped so completely, does that bring it closer to return? And if return is possible, should it be pursued? The concept of bringing the mammoth back, through cloning or genetic engineering, has captured public imagination. Headlines frame it as resurrection, but this word oversimplifies a far more complex reality. A mammoth reborn into the modern world would not step back into the Ice Age. It would awaken into a planet reshaped by humans, fragmented by infrastructure, and destabilized by rapid climate change. Survival would no longer depend on cold adaptation alone, but on navigating an environment fundamentally incompatible with the one that forged it. Even more troubling is the illusion that revival could erase loss. Extinction is not merely the disappearance of a body, it is the collapse of relationships. The mammoth was embedded in a network of grasses, soil, climate, and movement patterns that no longer exist. To bring back the animal without restoring the system is to create a living anachronism, a symbol, not a solution. Yet the mammoth continues to matter precisely because of this tension. It forces humanity to confront its own role in shaping planetary outcomes. The mammoth did not fall to a single cause. It was undone by convergence, climate instability, habitat transformation, and sustained human pressure. This pattern is not unique to the past. It is repeating now, at a far greater scale, across countless species. In this sense, the mammoth becomes a teacher rather than a victim. Its extinction illustrates the danger of slow adaptation in a fast-changing world. It shows how even dominant species can be pushed beyond recovery when change compounds faster than biology can respond. And it underscores the fact that survival is not guaranteed by strength, size, or history. The mammoth's legacy also reshapes how we understand responsibility. Early humans likely did not comprehend the full consequences of their actions. They hunted to survive, altered landscapes incrementally, and adapted as best they could. Today, humanity operates with awareness, data, and foresight. The mammoth's absence asks whether knowledge will make a difference where instinct once ruled. In the end, the mammoth does not need to return to speak. Its bones, frozen in time, already tell a complete story. A story of endurance stretched too far, of balance tipped gradually, then all at once, of a world that changed, and a giant that could not change fast enough. Across the Arctic tundra, where silence now replaces thunder, the mammoth's shadow still moves through human thought. It reminds us that the past is not distant, extinction is not abstract, and the future is always being shaped by what we choose to preserve, or allow to vanish. The Ice Age ended, the mammoth did not, and the lesson remains, waiting to be heard.